The seventh commandment is, "You shall not steal." Thus God himself places under his protection our worldly goods, property, and possessions. To take or injure another's goods is contrary to the justice and charity that is owed to one's neighbor. St. Paul says that neither thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor robbers will inherit the kingdom of God. For the Christian life strives to order this world's goods to God and to fraternal charity. This commandment is based on two fundamental principles. First, the universal destination of goods, and second, the right to private property. These two principles are based on truths about human nature, which are known from reason and experience, and which are confirmed and deepened by divine revelation. Let us then consider what is meant by the universal destination of goods. By human reason, we can know that mankind, the human race as a whole, is a differentiated unity, in which all the members are interrelated and interconnected. Each of us has a stake and an interest in both his own well-being and security, and also in his neighbor's. And the setting in which we live out our life is this earth, with its resources, which is mankind's shared home. This is clear from the book of Genesis, where we read, "Then God said, Let us make man in our image after our likeness. And God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." The Catechism explains this. In the beginning, God entrusted the earth and its resources to the common stewardship of mankind to take care of them, master them by labor, and enjoy their fruits. The goods of creation are destined for the whole human race. The Catechism also acknowledges that the earth is necessarily also divided up among men to assure the security of their lives, endangered by poverty and threatened by violence. The appropriation of property is legitimate for guaranteeing the freedom and dignity of persons, and for helping each of them to meet his basic needs and the needs of those in his charge. It should allow for a natural solidarity to develop between men. According to Catholic teaching and tradition, the natural right to private property is inviolable, since its security is necessary for the harmonious flourishing of persons, of families, and of all mankind. St. Thomas Aquinas gave 3 reasons for the necessity of private property. First, because every man is more careful to procure what is for himself alone than that which is common to man or to all, since each one would shirk the labor and leave to another that which concerns the community, as happens when there is a great number of servants. Secondly, because human affairs are conducted in more orderly fashion if each man is charged with taking care of some particular thing himself, whereas there would be confusion if everyone had to look after any one thing indeterminately. Thirdly, because a more peaceful state is ensured to man if each one is contented with his own. Hence it is to be observed that quarrels arise more frequently where there is no division of the things possessed. Far from being a form of selfishness, respect for private property makes possible prosperity and peace and free cooperation and justice among men. At the same time, this right to property is a means to a higher good, the good of the human family as a whole. Thus the Catechism teaches that the ownership of any property makes its holder a steward of providence, with the task of making it fruitful and communicating its benefits to others, first of all to his family. As with all rights, this right to property has limits and comes with responsibilities. Public authority has the duty to regulate its exercise. In using one's goods, one who would follow Christ must practice temperance, which is moderation in attachment to what he owns. A believer should also practice justice by giving to his neighbor what is due to him. Beyond that, a Christian should also have a sense of solidarity, that is, of social obligation, and willingness to share his blessings with those who are less fortunate. This is in keeping with the spirit of Christ himself, who, though he was rich, yet for your sake became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. The sin of theft is committed by unjustly taking or keeping the goods of one's neighbor, or by actions that wrong one's neighbor with respect to his goods. However, when someone in dire and urgent necessity, for example, in a situation of starvation or of utter destitution, makes use of another's goods, such an action does not constitute the sin of theft, since the institution of private property is ultimately for human well-being. Other sins forbidden by the seventh commandment are deliberate retention of goods lent or of objects lost, business fraud, paying unjust wages, forcing up prices by taking advantage of the ignorance or hardship of another. To steal or confiscate the goods of the church, which were given for the service of God, is to commit the sin of sacrilege, as well as of theft and robbery. It is also wrong to engage in speculation so as to drive up the price of goods artificially, to use corrupt influence to gain favorable treatment, or to take for personal use those goods that belong to the enterprise. It is contrary to the commandment to do shoddy work, to evade taxes, to forge checks and invoices, and to engage in excessive expenditures and waste of resources. If one damages private or public property, this requires reparation. While the free exchange of goods and services is generally beneficial, there are moral limits. The enslavement of human beings, whether for economic advantage or for ideological reasons, is contrary to God's law and to human dignity. Games of chance and the placing of wagers are not in themselves forbidden by the moral law. They do become morally unacceptable when these deprive someone of what is needed for the support of himself and his family. Since the seventh commandment is based upon respect for God's creation and an acknowledgement of divinely given human stewardship over it, man must also take care of mineral, vegetable, and animal resources. As the Catechism says, man's dominion over inanimate and other living beings, granted by the Creator, is not absolute. It is limited by concern for the quality of life of his neighbor, including generations to come. It requires a religious respect for the integrity of creation. Animals are God's good creatures and should not be abused or mistreated or made to suffer needlessly. However, it is legitimate to make use of them for human benefit, such as food and clothing and medical research. Animals have real value in God's sight, but they are not on the same level as human beings. The spirit in which we should regard the goods and blessings of this world is expressed by St. Paul in his words to Timothy. As for the rich in this world, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on uncertain riches, but on God, who richly furnishes us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good deeds, liberal and generous, thus laying up for themselves a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life which is life indeed.